It's on.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very, very much. And thank you all for coming to hear our presentation. I'm Alfred Marder, and I'm president of the U.S. Peace Council. It was quite evident to us over the several years that what we were hearing and reading from the press was obviously confusing the American people and the peace movement, the large, vocal anti-war movement that exists in our country. We saw the same pattern of every other invasion, where the leadership of the country was demonized and therefore used as an excuse to intervene in the internal affairs. Our organization, the U.S. Peace Council, is a firm advocate of the United Nations Charter, with deep respect for the sovereignty of all countries, respecting the rights of the peoples of those countries to determine their own destiny. It was our consideration that we had to reach out to the U.S. peace movement and ask that they participate in a delegation to Syria to see for themselves what existed, to speak to both officials and non-officials, civil society, to try to determine for themselves, independently, the situation in Syria and the road to peace. That is our responsibility. Our responsibility is to reach out first to the U.S. peace movement and then to the American people. The campaign to confuse the American people has been intense. And it is our purpose to try to bring some light, some understanding, which can perhaps lead to the American people demanding an end to the intervention and peace in Syria. We reached out to many peace organizations in our country to try to get a broad delegation to go. I would be less than honest if I did not say that some did not come because they were fearful of going into a war zone. Others demonstrated the confusion that does exist because of reading the propaganda and the barrage of, unfortunately, the media, which gives such a one-sided story. We feel we have that obligation. And it's a tribute to those who went, that they overcame those obstacles and agreed to go, and may I point out, paid their own way to go. So I would like to first introduce the co-leader of the delegation, a member of the Executive Board of the U.S. Peace Council, Dr. Henry Lowendorf.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Ambassador. Our delegation was co-led by Jerry Condon, who's the Vice President of Veterans for Peace. He's not able to be here. He's active right now in Seattle, Washington, where he lives, in that area, Two other members of the delegation are unable to be here. Judy Bellow, who lives in Rochester, and Vanessa Beeley, who is an independent journalist who has returned to Syria to report directly what she is seeing as she investigates further the truth of what's happening in Syria. I think what Alfred said is so true. We are fighting a mass of propaganda that has demonized the Syrian government, demonized its leaders, an effort that precedes every other intervention that the United States has made over the course of many, many decades in order to convince people that it's okay for quote-unquote humanitarian reasons to overthrow a government and to replace it with whatever. The United States prefers a government that is not independent, that is a willing participant in what the whatever U.S. policy is. So what we saw in Damascus and what we saw in the two villages we visited outside Damascus belies the propaganda that has overwhelmed us. It's hard. It's hard for even those of us who have been in the peace movement for a long time. It's hard for us to ignore this propaganda. It is so well orchestrated.